Now, let me just say, my wife, when we were first married, my wife Deborah and I, she came across that passage in Matthew that talked about not being married in heaven and made her super sad. We were newlyweds at the time, and she asked me if we could at least live near each other. And I encouraged her that everything would be fine. But secretly, ever since, I've been trying to live a godly life because she's going to be right up there in a mansion next to Jesus, and I'm afraid I'm going to be in a shack out in the suburbs. So whenever I find myself slipping, that's my motivation. I want to at least live close. Driving distance, right? Same side of the river. That's what I'm going for. That's what I'm hoping for. Which, by the way, Justin, I don't know if you talked about circumcision on purpose or not, but we have a graffiti artist, true story, in South Austin who goes by the handle foreskin. And he uses number 4 and writes out the word skin. I don't know if he's a Judaizer or why he is doing that. It's true. When you drive around, just look for our buddy Foreskin here in South Austin. Well, let me encourage you. What you are doing is so important. Being a leader in the local church. And it is so critical. I don't know if you know this, but leadership is actually a human necessity. Listen to this passage. Maybe you've come across this before. God was trying to get the attention of the Israelites. They were in a bad place, and God disciplines those he loves. So he's trying to get their attention, and so he takes away from them necessities in hopes that they might return back to him. Listen to what it says in Isaiah 3. See now, the Lord Almighty is about to take from Jerusalem and Judah both supply and support, all supplies of food and all supplies of water. The hero and the warrior, the judge and the prophet, the diviner and the elder, the captain of 50 and the man of rank, the counselor, skilled craftsman, and clever enchanter. I will make mere youths their officials. Children will rule over them. People will oppress each other, man against man, neighbor against neighbor. The young will rise up against the old, the nobody against the honored. Think about that for a moment. Human essentials. He took away food and water in hopes that they would turn back to him, then cry out for help. But you know what else will take a people to their knees and ask God for help? A lack of leadership. A lack of people that can serve and guide. What you are doing is critical. It's essential. It's a human essential. And what God has asked us to do is really hard. I think it was Bill Hybels who said years ago that running a business is easy compared to leading in the local church. Being in the military is easy compared to shepherding volunteers. Right? If you think about it, it makes perfect sense. How many of you are life group leaders? How many of you serve in Next Gen? All right, I'll just pick on you two for a moment because have you ever had someone in your life group, or have you ever had a kid in one of your small groups that you wish you could fire? You just can't. In business, you can fire someone who's not pulling their weight. In the military, how many of you are in guest services? Guest services? How many of you are in production? Have you ever wanted to court-martial someone who didn't show up when you needed them? You can't do that. We're working with volunteers. We're working with people who are broken and messed up. It's incredibly difficult to lead in a world of broken people, an environment where people have free will. And that's what God has called you to do. That's what he's called us to do. It reminds me of this episode of Seinfeld where Kramer found his favorite bathroom in New York City, and it happened to be in a high-rise. And he ended up going to a meeting. Right after this bathroom break, they said, hey, are you coming to the meeting? So he started working there. And he even had a little briefcase, and inside were reports. He was trying to get ahead. He had crackers in there. Jerry started to get upset with him for not spending enough time at home. And eventually, the boss pulls in Kramer and says, I hate to tell you this, but I'm going to have to let you go. And Kramer said, but I don't even work here. And the boss says, that's what makes this so hard. Right? Leading difficult people is part of God's calling on our lives. They need you more than you can realize. And so what I'm talking about in this section is power and wise boundaries. Out of the same book by Pete Scazzaro, he says this: navigating the issue of power is a true test of both character and leadership. We're more than willing to talk about the abuse of power when news breaks about a scandal in someone else's life, but the minefields surrounding the use of power are rarely acknowledged, much less openly discussed in Christian circles. So let's define power. Power is the capacity to influence. So what that means is all of us have power. All of us have a level of influence. Some degree, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's in our ministry area, we have a level of influence. That means we have a level of power. And some of us, if we're not careful, we take that power and we're more aggressive with that power. We lord it over others, as the scriptures tell us not to do. And if that's your struggle, then let me just say, stop it. But it's deeper than that. And I want to refer you back to what Kenny talked about earlier in the shadow, right? Some of us have inherited bad people skills, but we can overcome that to learn to love and to serve and to lead like Jesus. Others of us, it's not that we're too aggressive with our power. It's not that we take our power and impose it on other people. It's actually that we're not stepping into our level of influence. It's that we're actually shrinking back from what God has for us. And unfortunately, when we do that in our life group, in our ministry area, into that power vacuum, others who do not belong there might go, doing even more damage. And so what I want you to consider in this time together is, are you stepping in and leading as a servant? Are you serving as a leader? Not aggressive, not shrinking back. It causes great damage. Listen to this verse in Judges 21. In those days, Israel had no king, and everyone did as they saw fit. It's chaos. See, but the word power is not a word that we use often. But we need to understand how it's supposed to work in God's kingdom. See, it's different than in the ways of the world. See, the ways of the world is a power over. There's a hierarchy. There's a structure. But in the kingdom, things are upside down. It's a power that comes under. Right? And Jesus gives us this example in Mark 10. In the world, says Jesus, leaders throw their weight around, but it is not so with you. Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. So while Jesus is the invisible God who holds all things together, the almighty, eternal, immortal, and infinite God, he became finite. He became human, temporal, mortal. Jesus demonstrated his power not by force or control, but by choosing to come under us, humbly washing our feet and dying on the cross for us. That's power. Christ, Jesus, Philippians chapter 2, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant. See, it's critical to realize the church is not a corporation. We are not corporate executives who make tough decisions to get the job done. We are not CEOs implementing best practices in order to expand our market potential. The church is not a family business. We are the church, the body of Christ, the bride of Christ, the temple of God, the new family of Jesus. Everything is upside down. Certainly we can learn from the business world. But everything is upside down. To become great in this kingdom means to become the servant of all. And that's how God operates. The scriptures tell us that those who have pride will be humbled, and those who have humility will be exalted. I had this experience as a 20-year-old when I was planting a church along with my wife Deborah and a team at Seattle. We had a really difficult season. It was 4 years and 4 senior pastors, those 4 years we were there. And we really needed some healing and some help. I had graduated from seminary and got my master's degree. In fact, I had been one of those senior pastors at the age of 24, way, way too soon. And yet I still had this wrong mentality about how the kingdom works. And so when we moved to Los Angeles just to volunteer and be a part of a healthy community and find some healing before moving on to whatever else God had next for us, I remember going into one of the pastors and talking about my degree and my experience in Seattle and asking if there's any way that I could help. He had this smile on his face. He says, you know what, we've had this issue we've not been able to solve. I think you could help us with. And I thought, wow, that sounds great. That's exactly what I'm looking for. And so he turns around there in his office and he pulls out a jacket, like a reflective jacket, and he handed it to me and he said, could you meet me Sunday morning at 7:30 in the parking lot? I need help with our parking team. Now, I had not taken a class at seminary in parking lot management. I had expected he would give me a life group or ask me to teach a class or create some sort of internship for me. But instead, on Sunday morning, I showed up at 7:30, and there were two other guys there with me, one who could barely speak English and the other who had just gotten out of jail. And we only had 2 walkie-talkies. I did not get one. And I have to tell you, that first day, I was fuming. Inside, it was everything inside of me, not to just walk away. Like, what? This is so beneath me. This is not what I've been preparing for. This is not what I signed up for. But I kept reminding myself, I should be grateful for what I have and not mad about what I don't have. And so I started serving that parking lot. Now, if you've been around me enough, you know I have a strength called woo, which is winning others over, and I like to meet new people. And so in the parking lot, it was great. Everyone I met was new to me because I was new to the church. So I would say hello, and I basically became a greeter in the parking lot, right? Unofficial greeter. And I'd meet someone who wasn't connected. I'd invite them to the life group that we were part of. Our life group began to grow, and weeks after weeks went by. Suddenly, I began to enjoy it. In fact, after several weeks, a couple of months of doing this, I remember thinking to myself, you know what? I would rather be in the parking lot of a movement than preaching in a dying church. And then something amazing happened, something crazy, something only God would do would happen. The senior pastor, Erwin McManus, came up to me and said, I want to talk to you, Eric. There's something that we haven't been able to solve that I think you could help us with. That sounds eerily familiar. And so I went to meet with him, which, by the way, this was the 5th time I'd met him for the first time. So obviously I'm not great with first impressions. And so Deborah and I go to his office, and he begins to explain, you know, I was wondering if you two would be willing to serve with our teenagers. See, being a multi-ethnic church has its challenges, certainly has its blessings, but one of the challenges is we are multi-ethnic among our children, and we are multi-ethnic among our adults, but when it comes to the teenagers, we're homogenous. And he asked me, would you be our youth pastor? And I have to admit, I was a bit surprised by that. And then I just had to ask him again. I'd met him so many times, I didn't think he even knew who I was. And I'd never talked to him about my experience in Seattle or being a youth pastor even in Texas before that. And so I just had to know. I was just curious. I said, well, what made you think to ask me? And he said, well, I've been seeing you in the parking lot for the last several months. And I just thought, if this guy could be so happy serving, what if he could help our teenagers enjoy serving? I was cut to the core. If he'd only known the thoughts I'd had those first few weeks, he wouldn't want me anywhere close to children, right? But you know, I've seen that happen over and over. When we humble ourselves, when we serve other people, that's how we find life. When we lose our lives. So I want to give you a few of these principles from Pete Scazzaro's book on how to create wise boundaries, how to use our power for good. I'll give you them very quickly. There's 10. The first one is do an honest inventory of the power that God has granted you. Be more aware of the power that you have. 2, meet with a mature spiritual companion when you find yourself triggered. That's why running partners. And if you don't have running partners, ask 2 or 3 people that are in your life group. to start walking with you in that way. Or use your time in life group or your time in your ministry huddles to openly share about when you're struggling. Maybe step into recovery. Such a life-transforming experience for me. 3, enlist wise counsel to monitor dual relationships. The idea of some people are coming to your life group, they need you to be their pastor. And if you see your life group as a place where you can vent, then all of a sudden you're not helping the people that are looking to you for help. So having multiple relationships and others you can be open and honest with. 4, watch for early warning signs of danger. When you start to see that anger or frustration or you're easily annoyed, if you've been triggered, try and figure out why. Why am I on the edge of burnout? It could be you have not had healthy boundaries. 5, be sensitive to cultural, ethnic, gender, and generational nuances. Man, is this important. It's such a weird time to live in America. There's a march yesterday, a white nationalist march. I grew up in a time that felt like we were making progress. It's so weird to have conversations with my kids in a world that's this fractured. You know what's one of the most amazing things about our community? This is a place where it doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter where you've come from. It doesn't even matter how you vote. You are welcome here. What you're doing is so critical. If we can create a place that's safe, the world will come knocking on our door. Number 6, release people in a loving way. Not like see ya, but more like free them to be who they are and to serve. And don't hold people hostage to your life group or to your ministry area. What if they would be even more effective and in fact have learned everything that they could from you, but their passion may be over here? What if all of us began to recruit for all of us instead of holding people to us as if God could never provide more? Release people in a loving way. 7, remember that the burden to set boundaries and keep them clear falls on the person with greater power. That's us. Number 8, focus on your primary role. Be there for the people that are coming to you that need you. Number 9, meditate on Jesus' life as you encounter the suffering and loneliness of leadership. Align yourself with Christ by allowing extra time to read and meditate on the life and passion of Jesus. If we don't spend time in prayer and the Word, why would we expect the people we're serving to do so? 10, ask God for grace to forgive your enemies and yourself. The word enemies is in quotes. Remember, hurt people hurt people. Maybe you've felt betrayed by the very people you've been investing in and serving and loving. There's this great book called A Failure of Nerve by Edwin Friedman. He says something that is absolutely true and incredibly discouraging. So I thought I'd read it to you. He says this: sabotage is not something to be avoided as a leader, but expected. See, hurt people, and when we're investing in people who are broken, there's all sorts of edges, and sometimes there is displaced anger. They focus on you. They've been hurt by other leaders. They've been hurt by their mom or dad. They've been hurt by bosses, and all of a sudden you can become the reason of their pain, even though you had nothing to do with it. If you are serving by leading, you will have sabotage. But guess what? So did Jesus. And we can go to him with those feelings of pain and turn those enemies back into those we pray for, those we serve, those we love. What God is asking us to do is beautiful. And what's amazing is he gives us the power to do it. Romans 1:20 tells us that his eternal power and divine nature has been clearly seen. 2 Corinthians 10 tells us, on the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. 2 Peter 1 says that his divine power has given us everything we need for a godly life through our knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. We have everything we need to do what God has called us to do. If I can quote Peter Parker's uncle in the first Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility, right? How are you using the influence God has given you, the opportunities he's given you to invest in the lives of other people? I'm going to add 2 more because 10's not enough. 11, raise up others to replace you. What if all of us saw our job as investing in the people around us so that they could replace us? Guess what? Every time I've done that, God has always given me something else. We should never serve afraid that I need this group to keep my position so I can get to the next leadership huddle and get another bag. Right? We should never do that. But instead, invest in others. Let them replace you. One time, I was, again, a young leader. I went to Irwin, and I asked him, what am I doing well at? What should I work on? And he shared several things I could work on and grow as a leader. And then he said something. He said, but you know what's really positive about you, Eric? He says, you are really good at working with people who are more talented than you are. Thank you. I had to sit with that for a few days. But I'm telling you, it was actually an incredible compliment. Because if I could only work with those who are less talented than me, then I have a very small pool with which to recruit. But if I can learn to work with people who are more talented than me, in fact, serve people who could actually replace me, then guess what? I could work with everyone on the planet. See, you and I are called to replace ourselves, to find people who are more talented than you are, invest in them so they can take your place so that God can give you the next adventure he has for you. And then finally, number 12, pray. Luke 10. Jesus said, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. God can provide everyone you need to pull off what he's calling you to do. And sometimes it takes us not making announcements. By the way, that is the worst way to get a recruit. The best way to get a recruit is to look them in the eyes and say, I would love to serve with you. I would love to invest in you. Have you ever considered doing this? Would you come and do this with me? And so this little exercise is a little bit different than all the other exercises. This time, rather than being reflective, we're going to be more action-oriented. And around your seats should be a little stack of paper. If you could take that stack, and maybe if we can, there's some verses I just read through quite quickly. Maybe those will come up. The ones on power, Romans 1, 1st, 2 Peter 1. If you want to just kind of loop those back and forth. Here's what you're going to do on those paper. Make sure if you didn't get a paper, keep asking around, pull out a pen. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to write on these pieces of paper a message of encouragement to the people who are showing up to Gateway tomorrow. And as part of our experience, we're going to encourage people to go out into the lobby, whether they're central or north or here in south, and that we're going to encourage them to pick a piece of paper as an encouragement to them on their journey. And they're going to be reading what you are about to write. It could be a phrase, it could be a sentence, it could be a quote, it could be something from the scriptures. And remember, our people are in totally different places in their journey. So I want you to take this moment. Let God speak to you so that he can speak through this little piece of paper tomorrow to some people who might need exactly what you're about to write. Let me pray for us in this time. God, thank you. You've given us the chance to lead. You've asked us to follow in your footsteps and serve. Thank you, God, that when we do lose our life in serving others, we find our life. And you are our life, Jesus. So God, even now, speak to us. We know this is a battle that the people we're serving are fighting between the spirit and the flesh. We're fighting between the spirit and the flesh. So God, may we yield more and more to you so we can look at them and say, follow me as I follow Jesus. So God, even now, speak to us as we write on these pieces of paper the exact message that you have for our people tomorrow. Bring each person that needs to be there. May they grab the exact sheet of paper they need. So speak through us as we write these things down in this moment.